You're listening to KPBS Midday Edition. I'm Jade Hindman. We've been talking about climate policy and how it could shift under a second Trump term. We want to get some reactions from young people who are leading climate activism efforts across the country, including right here in San Diego. Joining me now is Emma Weibel. She's a senior at La Jolla High and an activist with Youth for Climate, a program out of a local nonprofit, San Diego 350. Emma, thank you so much for coming back to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Glad you're here. So, first off, I want to get your initial reaction to the inauguration last week and the flurry of executive orders signed by Donald Trump, especially related to climate. How are you feeling?
I'm definitely feeling very overwhelmed and quite afraid and angry from all of the executive orders and just everything that has happened in this first week. I think just this first week has made it clear what President Trump's priorities are going to be and what this administration is prioritizing. And I think that, like, while LA burns, he is doing the exact opposite of what we need to do in order to create a more stable future for our country. And just with all of the decisions that he made, it is clear that he is valuing the pocketbooks of billionaires more than he is American lives. And that's something that's really scary. And as young people, it's just clear that our lives are not being valued by our government.
Talk more about that. How are your peers reacting and responding to all of this?
I would say it's a mix of just absolute anger and just being so overwhelmed because this is one of the first administrations or elections in which we have been old enough to really understand the implications. And it's just so frustrating because we've grown up being told that, like, our actions in our government is supposed to represent us, but increasingly it seems like our government is acting against us, and it's been a very scary reality to deal with.
You mentioned the wildfires that are continuing to devastate Los Angeles, and several fires have now burned through parts of San Diego. It's a moment where climate change related disasters are literally right in our face. Some climate activists in LA are even blaming the fossil fuel industry. How have you been processing the fires, and what are your thoughts on that?
The fires have been similarly scary, and I think just how quickly it seemed to get so close to us. It seemed like just yesterday I was texting my friends in LA, making sure that they were safe, and then the day after they were texting me. We had to stop in the middle of my class to check who might have needed to evacuate their homes, and that's so scary. And I think it shows the fact that the climate crisis is not some looming threat, but that it's here and that it's now, and that it's only going to keep getting closer. And it's been terrifying and something that we've never seen at this scale before. And I think it's a premonition of the types of disasters we're going to have to deal with in the future.
Right, because 2024 was the hottest year on record, and that affects everything from climate change related disasters to biodiversity loss to negative impacts on human health. How does that trend make you feel about the future?
It's definitely scary, and I think that so much time can be spent just like letting that immobilize us. But I think that the fact that we have so much to lose means that we have so much worth fighting for. And I really, really hope that the fact that there's so much evidence and that they're increasingly disastrous effects of climate change are becoming increasingly clear, that this will be a call to action to people. So more than spending my time like being scared for my future, which I definitely am, but I try to look at the side of empowerment. And I really hope that people see these trends, and instead of being scared, they use it as a call to take action.
Yeah. Well, back to some of Trump's climate policies. One of his executive orders last week withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Agreement, and that's a deal to cut greenhouse gas emissions to limit global warming. What's your reaction to this, especially with the backdrop of the climate destruction we're seeing at the moment?
I am definitely very, very angry, because it again shows what these next 4 years might look like. But it also just shows the way that the United States is withdrawing from international efforts to fight the climate crisis, which is particularly worrying because the United States is one of the countries that is most at fault for our emissions and for the climate crisis. And we're really abandoning the rest of the world and nations that are on the front line by pulling out of these agreements, but also abandoning all of the Americans and people in this country that are going to continue to be suffering by deciding that we no longer want to be part of this worldwide effort to fight an issue that really is going to affect all of us. And so it's very, very angering and again shows the fact that this administration is prioritizing profit over human lives.
You know, you've pretty much grown up with Trump always on the political stage, nearly 10 years at this point. Has that influenced your desire to engage in climate activism?
I think it's definitely shaped my view of our political system, and definitely the fact that we continue to have such polarizing politicians has driven my alarm and inspired me to do community organizing because I think so often politicians like Trump feed off of our division, and so it has certainly defined the political landscape of my lifetime, but it has also inspired me to try to make a difference in a increasingly hostile political environment.
Speaking of making a difference, activism and social change starts local, and you all have been busy working to fight for a cleaner climate. What have you been focusing on?
Yeah, so Youth v. Oil, which is the campaign that I lead at San Diego 350, we are dedicated to phasing out extraction and reliance on fossil fuels in California and across the state. But this legislative session, we are really focusing on trying to get a polluters pay climate superfund passed in California. And this is something that was recently passed in both Vermont and New York, and something that I think is increasingly clear why we need it with the devastating destruction of the LA fires. But basically, what we want to see is an EPA controlled fund that the worst polluters of the last couple of decades are forced by law to pay into. And then these funds can be tapped into by the state government to deal with climate disasters, rebuilding, mitigating the effects of climate change, and really shifting the burden of dealing with these disasters from the backs of Californian taxpayers and our government onto those that are actually responsible. And so that is going to be something that we're really pushing on, joining a statewide effort. And again, that I think is increasingly clear why we need this, because this devastation should not be falling on the shoulders of California's citizens and should instead be put on the people that knowingly continued burning fossil fuels for decades.
Yeah. Have you seen success with your efforts?
So this campaign for this legislative session is still pretty new. It is the Polluters Pay Climate Superfund was introduced last year and ended up being tabled, but it is going to be introduced soon. And we're really hoping that with the backdrop of these disasters, we're going to be getting a lot of support. And we have been seeing growing support, especially after the Superfund has passed in 2 other states. So we're really hopeful that we will be able to get the momentum to pass this in California as well this year. But we are still pretty early on in the campaign. So there's still definitely a lot of work to do.
You know, there's so much going on in California. What are the main environmental issues facing people here in San Diego from where you sit?
I think here in San Diego, we are no strangers to all of the issues that are affecting our state and our country. I mean, we definitely are on the front line of wildfires and extreme heat, which, touch in with air pollution, erosion, and drought. And all these things have been a reality for Southern Californians, but increasingly destructive reality. And then I think that we also saw the infrastructure effects of the rain and flood last year. And I think just like all other parts of the nation, our infrastructure is simply not equipped for the level of climate disaster and intensity that we are going to be seeing. And so the climate crisis is going to affect us as it will the rest of the nation. And it will be really important to make sure that we are protecting our frontline communities here in San Diego from the worst effects and making sure that we are making the necessary changes to keep all of San Diego safe.
Do you feel like older generations put too much pressure on youth activists to save our climate, especially when you and future generations will face these lasting consequences of climate change?
Yeah, I definitely think that so often the fact that young people are are stepping up and fighting is something that is taken for granted. And I think that the fact that climate change has seemed so intangible and the fact that our status quo was so entrenched in the use of fossil fuels and unsustainable practices has made people complacent, especially older generations that have lived in this reality for much longer. And it is frustrating a lot of the times as youth climate activists to feel like we are the only ones screaming into this void and the people that are empowered don't listen. So, since we are going to have to live with this for the rest of our lives, and we simply are not the ones with the power to make the decisions that will decide our future, it is so important that adults listen to us and that our politicians prioritize climate now.
Emma, the last time we had you on the show, we discussed eco anxiety or climate anxiety. How are you working through that right now?
It's definitely been tough because like so often the fluctuation of just like these events, and right now it's just been a concentration of our politicians seeming to ignore us and some of the worst effects of climate change on full display. But I think more than ever it is so important for us to all come together as a community. And so while I think so many young people are scared, and this is definitely going to take a toll on our mental health and our ability to live our lives, because I mean, it's not normal to be at school and be getting alerts of wildfires popping up, wondering if it is your home that is on fire or something like that. So I'd say that the convergence of so many scary realities from our politicians clearly not listening to us and not caring about our future, as well as so many destructive disasters on the front page, it is really difficult right now to not feel really scared. And it is just a reality that no other generation has had to deal with. But I think that more than anything, it is so important for us to come together as a community and rely on each other and derive hope from the fight itself and from knowing that this is the right thing and that a better future is possible, rather than being so connected and having our mental health be so connected with the decisions of leaders that simply don't care about our lives. And so it's definitely difficult to separate ourselves and our success and our measure of our success from the decisions of people far away. But I think that it's necessary sometimes and something that's going to be very big for the next 4 years.
I've been speaking with Emma Weibel, La Jolla High School senior and climate activist with San Diego 350 and Youth for Climate. Emma, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindman. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.